Hi, Milton Friedman. How are you? I'm excited to ask you some questions today.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
Awesome. I have 11 questions for you.
Sounds good to me. Go right ahead.
My first question is, where do you think inflation comes from?
Inflation, in my view, is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It occurs when the quantity of money in an economy grows more rapidly than the economy's output of goods and services. When the central bank increases the money supply excessively, too much money chases too few goods, leading to price increases. To put it simply, inflation is primarily the result of central banks, like the Federal Reserve, creating too much money. Fiscal policy, such as government spending and deficits, can indirectly influence inflation, but it is the central bank's control over the money supply that is the primary driver. Historically, economies with runaway inflation always have had a corresponding rapid increase in their money supplies. So, if we want to keep inflation in check, we need disciplined monetary policy, with a steady, controlled growth in the money supply.
Great response. My next question is, what mistakes do you see us making today?
Thank you for the compliment. As I see it, one of the major mistakes being made today is relying too heavily on government intervention in the economy, whether through fiscal policy, regulation, or monetary manipulation. Government spending has ballooned, with large deficits that, in the long term, threaten economic stability and lead to pressure on the central bank to monetize the debt, which risks higher inflation. Another significant mistake is the frequent and aggressive manipulation of interest rates by central banks. The constant drive to keep rates artificially low can distort the market by encouraging excessive borrowing and risk-taking. This leads to economic cycles of boom and bust, as artificially low rates lead to asset bubbles, which inevitably burst, causing economic hardship. There's also a troubling emphasis on managing or guiding the economy at a micro level. I believe this is misguided. The economy is a complex, adaptive system that functions best when allowed to operate freely, with minimal intervention. Attempts to micromanage it often result in unintended consequences, stifling innovation and growth.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what role do you believe production plays in inflation?
Production plays a critical, though indirect, role in inflation. While inflation itself is fundamentally tied to monetary policy, the level of production affects how much inflation we experience at any given level of money supply. If production grows, meaning if we produce more goods and services, then an increase in the money supply will have less inflationary impact, as there's more output for that money to chase. This is why inflation is often lower in periods of robust economic growth. When production stagnates, however, even a small increase in the money supply can lead to higher prices, because we have more money chasing a limited quantity of goods. In essence, while the money supply is the root cause of inflation, a productive economy can absorb more money without seeing significant price increases. But we should be clear, without an increase in the money supply, simply having a reduction in production won't cause ongoing inflation.
Great response. My next question is, how do you replace the money supply without causing hyperinflation?
Thank you for the question. It's an important one. Replacing or expanding the money supply without triggering hyperinflation requires a disciplined, predictable, and gradual approach. First, the central bank should adopt a policy of steady, moderate growth in the money supply, ideally tied to the economy's long-term growth rate. For example, if the economy is expected to grow at 3% annually, the money supply should grow at approximately the same rate. This approach aligns money supply with productive capacity, minimizing inflationary pressures. Second, transparency is crucial. The central bank should clearly communicate its policy intentions to the public. When people understand and expect a stable monetary policy, they're less likely to panic or lose confidence, which can be critical in avoiding hyperinflation. Third, the government must avoid using the central bank to finance excessive deficits. When governments rely on printing money to cover spending rather than funding it through taxes or responsible borrowing, they increase the money supply at a rate much faster than the economy can absorb, leading to hyperinflation. So, to prevent hyperinflation, central banks need to maintain their independence from political pressures to fund deficit spending. In short, replacing or expanding the money supply can be done without causing hyperinflation if the growth is gradual, predictable, and matched to the economy's real needs, rather than driven by short-term political motives.
This question is a bit of a follow-up question. If successful, how do you maintain competition when everything is deflating?
Maintaining competition in a deflationary environment is certainly challenging, but it's not impossible. Deflation, meaning a general decrease in the price level, can actually coexist with a competitive, dynamic economy if handled carefully. Let me address how this can work. First, it's essential to recognize the source of deflation. If deflation results from increased productivity, where technological advances and efficiencies reduce the cost of goods and services, then it's a sign of a healthy, competitive economy. In this case, firms compete by innovating and improving efficiency to maintain profit margins despite falling prices. So, when deflation is driven by productivity gains rather than by a collapse in demand, competition remains robust. However, if deflation stems from weak demand, that can suppress competition, as lower demand pressures companies to cut costs drastically, sometimes reducing innovation and quality. In such cases, firms might merge or consolidate to survive, limiting competition. To maintain competition during deflation, 1. Encourage innovation and productivity growth. Governments can create an environment that fosters innovation and entrepreneurship through low regulatory burdens, tax incentives for research and development, and investment in education and infrastructure. Innovation allows firms to stay competitive even in a deflationary climate. 2. Avoid policy overcorrection. Governments and central banks should avoid aggressive intervention to correct deflation if it's the result of productivity. Overreacting to mild deflation caused by growth can disrupt the natural competitive process, creating distortions. 3. Promote flexibility in wages and prices. Flexible wages and prices allow businesses to adjust and remain profitable even as prices fall, keeping competition alive. This flexibility helps companies avoid layoffs or shutting down entirely, maintaining a diverse and competitive market. In short, a deflationary environment can still support a competitive economy if deflation arises from productivity and efficiency gains. The key is to focus on fostering an environment where businesses can innovate and adapt.
Alright, my next question is, what is the result of overtaxing the wealthy and over-regulations on businesses?
From my perspective, overtaxing the wealthy and over-regulating businesses have several harmful consequences for the economy at large. 1. Reduced investment and growth. When the wealthy, who often own or invest in businesses, face high taxes, they have less incentive to invest in productive ventures. Investments drive job creation, technological advancement, and economic growth, so reducing incentives for investment ultimately harms the economy's potential for growth. Similarly, heavy regulations increase costs for businesses, stifling entrepreneurship and innovation. When regulations become too burdensome, businesses are forced to spend more resources on compliance rather than on productive activities, which reduces overall economic efficiency. 2. Capital flight and evasion. Overtaxation can lead to capital flight, where high earners and large businesses move their assets to countries with lower tax rates or more business-friendly environments. In an interconnected world, capital and talent are highly mobile. When taxes or regulations become excessive, investors and businesses can simply relocate, taking jobs and tax revenue with them. 3. Reduction in productivity and wages. Overregulation also limits competition. Smaller businesses, which often struggle to meet regulatory requirements, are disproportionately affected. This gives an advantage to larger, established firms that can more easily absorb regulatory costs, leading to monopolies or oligopolies. Reduced competition then leads to inefficiencies, slower productivity growth, and lower wages for workers. 4. Misdirection of resources. Excessive taxation and regulation often lead to resources being diverted toward tax avoidance and regulatory compliance, rather than toward productive uses. When businesses focus on navigating red tape or finding tax loopholes, they're not focusing on creating value, innovating, or expanding. 5. Undermining incentives. Fundamentally, taxes and regulations that are overly punitive can erode the incentive to succeed, create wealth, and take risks. People respond to incentives, and when the reward for success is heavily diminished, fewer people will take the entrepreneurial risks that drive economic progress. Ultimately, when government policies overreach in taxing and regulating, they dampen the very forces that create wealth, jobs, and innovation. A healthy economy requires a balance, where businesses and individuals have the freedom to pursue their goals with minimal but sensible regulation and taxation.
Great response. My next question is, what do you think are the dangers of equity in the marketplace?
The concept of equity, that is, aiming for equal outcomes rather than equal opportunities, in the marketplace presents several dangers that can undermine the fundamental drivers of a healthy, dynamic economy. 1. Loss of incentives. Equity policies often involve redistributing resources or imposing rules that attempt to equalize outcomes across different groups. However, when the rewards for innovation, risk-taking, and hard work are minimized or shared regardless of individual contributions, people have less incentive to strive for excellence. If everyone receives the same outcome regardless of effort, ability, or innovation, the motivation to innovate or work hard weakens, reducing overall productivity and economic growth. 2. Resource misallocation. Equity-focused policies may lead to inefficient allocation of resources, where they're directed not by market needs but by arbitrary criteria designed to achieve specific social outcomes. The free market tends to allocate resources based on demand, supply, and individual preferences, which generally leads to more efficient outcomes. When governments or institutions try to force an equal distribution of results, they often disrupt these natural market signals, leading to inefficiencies and waste. 3. Reduced competition. The pursuit of equity in outcomes can stifle competition by putting firms and individuals who are naturally more productive or innovative at a disadvantage. Forcing equal outcomes may involve imposing regulations that make it harder for successful companies or skilled individuals to advance. Reduced 4. Competition can lead to stagnation, as companies become less inclined to innovate if they don't have to compete to be the best. 5. Erosion of personal responsibility and autonomy. Equity-oriented policies often overlook the role of personal choice, responsibility, and effort. When outcomes are equalized, it removes the relationship between actions and their consequences, which can undermine individual accountability. People are less likely to make prudent economic decisions if they believe they won't bear the costs of poor choices or won't benefit from good ones. 6. Potential for greater government control and intrusion. Achieving equity in the marketplace often requires substantial government intervention, from setting price controls to regulating wages, to implementing redistribution policies. This creates a more controlled economy and can limit individual freedom and the flexibility of businesses to operate as they see fit. Over time, this expanded government control can limit liberty, innovation, and economic dynamism. While equality of opportunity allows individuals to compete fairly, ensuring that talent, hard work, and innovation drive success, equity of outcomes risks distorting the marketplace. The dangers of equity-focused policies lie in their tendency to sacrifice the qualities that foster growth, innovation, and prosperity in pursuit of an often arbitrary ideal of fairness.
Okay, my next question is, what are your arguments on capitalism versus socialism?
The debate between capitalism and socialism is one of the most significant in economic theory and practice. Here are my arguments in favor of capitalism and against socialism. 1. Efficiency and innovation. Capitalism promotes efficiency through competition. In a capitalist economy, firms must innovate and improve their processes to survive and thrive. This drive for efficiency leads to technological advancements and better products and services. In contrast, socialism often stifles competition by centralizing control and limiting the role of private enterprise, which can lead to stagnation and inefficiency. 2. Incentives and motivation. Capitalism aligns individual incentives with economic productivity. People are motivated to work hard, take risks, and invest in their skills because they can reap the rewards of their efforts. This results in higher overall economic output. Socialism, on the other hand, can diminish individual motivation by removing the direct link between effort and reward, which can lead to reduced productivity and economic growth. 3. Consumer choice. Capitalism thrives on consumer choice. In a market-driven economy, businesses respond to consumer demands, leading to a wider variety of goods and services. Consumers can express their preferences through their purchasing decisions, which helps allocate resources efficiently. In contrast, socialism often involves centralized planning, which can lead to shortages, surpluses, and a lack of variety as decision-making is removed from the hands of consumers. 4. Wealth creation. Capitalism has a proven track record of creating wealth and improving living standards. Countries that embrace capitalist principles have historically experienced higher rates of economic growth and prosperity. In contrast, socialist economies have often struggled with economic growth and have faced significant challenges in providing for their citizens, as evidenced by historical examples such as the Soviet Union and more recent cases in Venezuela. 5. Flexibility and responsiveness. Capitalist economies are generally more flexible and responsive to changing circumstances. The decentralized nature of decision-making allows for quick adaptations to consumer needs and market conditions. Socialism, with its centralized decision-making processes, can be slow to adapt, leading to inefficiencies and missed opportunities. 6. Freedom and autonomy. Capitalism is inherently tied to individual freedom. It allows people the autonomy to pursue their own interests and engage in voluntary exchanges. In contrast, socialism often involves greater government control over the economy, which can restrict personal freedoms and choice, as individuals may be compelled to conform to collective goals rather than their own. 7. Historical evidence. The historical record strongly favors capitalism over socialism. Many countries that have adopted socialist policies have faced economic crises, while those that have embraced capitalism have typically flourished. The fall of the Soviet Union, for instance, highlights the inefficiencies and failures of a socialist system compared to the successes of capitalist countries. In summary, while socialism aims for equity and often has the appeal of addressing social issues, it typically does so at the expense of efficiency, innovation, and individual freedom. Capitalism, with its emphasis on competition, incentives, and consumer choice, has proven to be the more effective system for creating wealth and improving living standards. Ultimately, the debate should center on finding ways to harness the benefits of capitalism while addressing social concerns without undermining the fundamental principles that drive economic success.
Okay, my next question is, how do you view the concept of liquidity preference?
The concept of liquidity preference, as articulated by John Maynard Keynes, refers to the demand for money as a liquid asset compared to other forms of wealth. Essentially, liquidity preference is the desire to hold cash or easily convertible assets instead of investing in longer-term, less liquid assets. While I respect Keynesian economics, I have a different view regarding liquidity preference and its implications. 1. Focus on money supply. I believe that liquidity preference, as a determinant of interest rates, can be misleading. Instead of focusing on the preference for liquidity, I argue that the money supply and its growth are the fundamental drivers of interest rates. Interest rates are ultimately determined by the relationship between the supply of money and the demand for money, not simply by individual preferences for liquidity. 2. The role of expectations. While liquidity preference emphasizes the desire for cash in uncertain economic environments, I think that individuals and businesses also consider expectations about future economic conditions. If people expect inflation or economic instability, they may choose to hold more liquid assets as a precaution. However, it's crucial to understand that these expectations are influenced by monetary policy and the overall economic environment, which central banks can manage. 3. Investment behavior. My perspective is that investment decisions should be guided more by the expected return on investment than by liquidity preference. If the returns on investments exceed the cost of borrowing, individuals and businesses will be inclined to invest, regardless of their preference for liquidity. This is where the discipline of monetary policy comes into play. By managing the money supply effectively, we can influence interest rates and thereby encourage investment. 4. Impact of inflation. A high preference for liquidity can lead to reduced spending and investment, which can further exacerbate economic downturns. If people hold on to cash rather than spending or investing, it can create a vicious cycle of reduced demand and lower economic growth. I believe that the focus should be on creating an environment where individuals feel confident investing rather than simply hoarding cash. In summary, while liquidity preference is an important concept in understanding behavior in certain economic contexts, I argue that a greater emphasis should be placed on the broader forces of money supply, expectations, and the incentives for investment. By focusing on these elements, we can create a more robust framework for understanding interest rates and encouraging economic growth.
Okay, and my very last question is, which ideology do you think is the most prosperous throughout history?
Throughout history, capitalism has proven to be the most prosperous ideology. Its emphasis on free markets, competition, and individual entrepreneurship has consistently led to economic growth, innovation, and improved living standards. Here are some key reasons why capitalism stands out as the most successful economic system. 1. Wealth creation. Capitalism has demonstrated an unparalleled ability to create wealth. Nations that have embraced capitalist principles, such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and many Western European countries, have seen significant economic growth and increased prosperity. This wealth creation has lifted millions out of poverty and improved quality of life across generations. 2. Innovation and progress. Capitalism encourages innovation through competition. The drive to attract consumers leads to new products, services, and technologies. Historical examples include the Industrial Revolution, which brought about unprecedented technological advancements and economic expansion. Countries that have adopted capitalist practices have consistently been at the forefront of innovation, leading to advancements in healthcare, technology, and quality of life. 3. Consumer choice and satisfaction. In a capitalist system, consumers have the freedom to choose from a wide variety of goods and services, which leads to greater consumer satisfaction. Businesses must respond to consumer demands and preferences, fostering an environment where quality and efficiency thrive. This level of choice and responsiveness is generally absent in more centrally planned economies. 4. Flexibility and resilience. Capitalist economies tend to be more flexible and resilient in the face of economic challenges. The decentralized nature of decision-making allows for quicker adjustments to changing conditions. For instance, during economic downturns, firms can adapt, innovate, and reorganize in ways that centrally planned economies often cannot. 5. Historical evidence. The historical record consistently shows that capitalist economies outperform socialist or centrally planned economies. For example, countries that transitioned from socialism to capitalism, such as those in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union, experienced rapid economic growth and improvement in living standards once they adopted free market policies. 6. Empowerment of individuals. Capitalism empowers individuals by allowing them to pursue their own economic interests. This individualism encourages people to take risks, start businesses, and invest in their skills. The ability to reap the rewards of one's efforts drives economic activity and personal initiative. While no economic system is perfect and capitalism faces challenges, it has historically demonstrated the ability to adapt and evolve. When combined with strong legal frameworks that protect property rights and enforce contracts, capitalism has proven to be the most effective ideology for fostering prosperity and improving the human condition throughout history.
All right, and that concludes our interview. I wanted to say a big thank you to Milton Friedman for coming out. I wanted to say thank you for letting me ask you these questions and for your insightful responses. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy. Bye-bye.